Hello, friends. My name is RD and welcome back to my channel, Dhode R Vision English. I hope you all are doing great. Today I'm going to explain the South Korean drama Genie Make a Wish. This drama was released in 2025. It stars Kim Woo-bin as the male lead, Genie, and the stunning Bae Suzy as the female lead, Ga-young. It has received a 6.3 out of 10 rating on IMDb, but trust me, the story is far more emotional than the numbers suggest. It falls under the slow but passionate romantic genre. If you've ever loved someone deeply and waited for that love beyond time, then this beautiful story is definitely for you. It will truly touch your heart and stay with you for a long time. So without further delay, let's start our drama. The story begins with the introduction of the Jinn, beings created by God from fire. Their power was so immense that many of them became arrogant, even aspiring to rival or surpass God himself. But there was one long-haired Jinn who thought differently. To him, trying to surpass God was nothing but foolishness. One day, God became furious and destroyed the arrogant Jinn and demons. The long-haired Jinn, however, survived by hiding inside a lamp. After that, God created a new being to replace the Jinn, humans, who were made from clay. God commanded the angels and the remaining Jinn to honor the first human, but one Jinn refused, and as a result, he was cast down into hell. That Jinn pleaded with God. He accepted his fate on one condition, that he be allowed to tempt and corrupt humans, leading them into hell. God granted his request, but with one warning. If the Jinn ever met a human with a pure heart, he himself would be thrown into the deepest part of hell. And thus began the legend of the 3 wishes. The Jinn descended to earth and proved that humans were full of greed. Almost everyone he met asked for things that served only their selfish desires, even if it meant betraying their loved ones. But one day, he encountered a young girl who used all 3 of her wishes to help others. Because of this, God punished the Jinn by trapping him inside the lamp until he would one day meet the girl's reincarnation, the one destined to set him free. Meanwhile, in a restaurant in Dubai, a woman named Ga-young was waiting for someone. It turned out she was waiting for her mother, the woman who had abandoned her as a child. Ga-young had been raised by her grandmother, while her mother only sent money through other people. Her grandmother always refused the money out of pain and resentment. Ga-young was different from other children. She grew up emotionless, cold, and almost psychopathic. Her teacher once called her grandmother to school because Ga-young enjoyed dissecting frogs, showing no fear or hesitation. Her emotions were uncontrollable, and she even once confessed that she wanted to kill her grandmother. Despite this, her grandmother tried to teach her empathy. When Ga-young finally met her mother, the reunion was filled with tension. Her mother was puzzled as to why Ga-young continued to visit her every year despite being abandoned. Ga-young coldly replied that she had never used her mother's money. Instead, she donated it. To buy her own luxuries, she worked hard, even doing rough labor that left her hands covered in scars. When her mother asked why she had no expression, Ga-young replied that it was her parents' fault. They had never taught her how to feel. She told her mother that she and her grandmother were doing fine. But before leaving, she added a chilling warning. If she ever found out that her grandmother had cried because of her mother, she would personally strangle her until she could never show any expression again. One day, Ga-young joined a desert tour in Dubai. While walking, she tripped over something and, annoyed, kicked it. It turned out to be an old lamp. When she tried to throw it away, it mysteriously reappeared in front of her. As the desert wind brushed through her hair and touched the lamp's surface, a long-haired Jinn emerged from it. Yet Ga-young showed no fear at all. In fact, she thought the man was just a strange person following her. The Jinn smelled Ga-young's scent and said that he had finally found the person responsible for imprisoning him for hundreds of years. He introduced himself as the demon Jinn who had been trapped inside the lamp. However, before he could finish his story, he suddenly staggered in pain after being struck hard by Ga-young, making her believe he was just a fool. When she returned to her hotel room, the Jinn was already there waiting for her. Calmly, Ga-young asked how he had managed to get in. The Jinn explained that he was the spirit from the magical lamp and that she should remember him because they had met almost 1,000 years ago. That night, the Jinn told her about his past. about God's punishment, the pure-hearted child, and why he had now come looking for her. God had given him one final chance. If he failed again, he would be cast into hell for eternity. With the help of his companion, Sade, the jinn finally found Gayong, the reincarnation of the pure-hearted child, who was now his new master. The jinn asked Gayong to make 3 wishes, but warned her there were limits. She could not bring the dead back to life or travel into the future. Gayong refused outright. Despite his explanations and persistence, she still couldn't believe him. But when she realized that only she could see him, she began to accept that he might be real. Even then, she tried to get rid of him repeatedly, but the jinn kept returning, insisting that Gayong was his master. Out of curiosity, Gayong finally asked the jinn to make her fly like a superhero. The jinn agreed and took her soaring through the Dubai sky until they reached the tallest building. There, the jinn proved he was truly real. But instead of being afraid, Gayong was thrilled. She felt she had found the perfect opponent. Without hesitation, she pushed the jinn off the building. Of course, he didn't die. Although his body was crushed, he flew back up again, furious at Gayong for toying with him. He decided that the only way to make her utter a wish was to make her fear death. So, the jinn tried to strangle her. But instead of being scared, Gayong laughed, her face emotionless, as if the game had just begun. The jinn was confused as to why Gayong wasn't afraid of him. He even dropped her from the top of the building, yet she only smiled. From her scent, he knew she was indeed the human he had been searching for. He began to wonder, had humans changed so much that he no longer needed to tempt them? The jinn then left her alone on the rooftop. After some reflection, however, he realized he couldn't leave his master. That day, he decided to follow Gayong back home to Seoul. When they arrived at her grandmother's house, where several elderly neighbors had gathered, everyone was shocked to see Gayong return with a handsome man. They all assumed he was her fiancé. Gayong, surprised but silent, simply said that the man was no one special. She decided to ignore the jinn's presence and even tried to hit him, but her grandmother stopped her and reminded her of their promise. Whenever Gayong felt angry, she should listen to the ticking of her watch until her heart calmed down. This left the jinn completely bewildered. When Gayong was little, she often hated her grandmother for constantly giving her advice. She couldn't stand being told what to do and wanted to live apart from her. With great patience, her grandmother had always said, "Study hard until you reach first rank." Eventually, Gayong went to college and started working. Only then was she finally able to live apart from her grandmother. From that day on, Gayong studied diligently and always achieved top grades. Gayong excelled in her studies and was accepted into a prestigious university. However, instead of getting a high-paying job in the city, she decided to open a car repair workshop in her hometown. Through the neighbors, the jinn learned more about how Gayong lived. They had all helped raise her. Everyone in town knew her as a psychopath, but rather than teaching her not to kill, they had taught her about life itself. And even though she lived without emotion, Gayong managed to live her life well. The only person she could talk to and who truly understood her was Minji, a dentist and Gayong's only friend. Gayong told Minji about meeting the jinn, though she didn't reveal that he was the real one from the lamp. From observing her, the jinn finally understood Gayong's nature. She was an emotionless psychopath. That made things complicated. She had no interest in making any wishes, and his plan to destroy her might not work. The jinn then came up with an idea. One day, while Gayong was at her workshop, he set fire to her office and trapped her inside. Not only that, he planned to burn down the entire town and eventually the whole world. If Gayong didn't make a wish soon. But Gayong didn't care. Instead, she grew furious, escaped through another door, and beat the jinn mercilessly. Later, Gayong bought the jinn a brooch. She told him to wear it so that only she could see him. The brooch could be removed if he wanted to appear before others. She had already been labeled a crazy psychopath in town. She didn't need any more attention. Gayong then asked why the jinn was so obsessed with her wishes and why he wanted to kill her. The jinn reminded her that she was the one who had imprisoned him inside the magic lamp. Gayong demanded proof, evidence that she was truly the one who had trapped him. The Jinn just smiled, saying it was useless because she would remember nothing. Seducing Gayong was proving difficult. But he was confident that once she made her first wish, she would be tempted to make another and another. Eventually proving his belief that humans were selfish and corrupt, Gayong challenged him. She told the Jinn to prove his claim that humans were selfish and rotten. "Grant the wishes of 5 people who pass by this street," she said. "If 3 or more of them turn out to be as corrupt as you say, I'll make my remaining 2 wishes and let you kill me." The Jinn was puzzled. "Why 2? I offered you 3 wishes." Gayong smirked. "Because I've already made my first wish. For you to prove that humans are selfish." The first person who passed by was Imsen, a tired-looking convenience store employee. Soon after came Bugong, a bank worker and Gayong's former classmate, who looked envious of Gayong's expensive handbag. After Bugong left, the sound of a barking dog echoed nearby. The dog, or Gay as it was called, passed by, and the Jinn decided to include it on his list of wish recipients. Next came Sang Tae, one of Gayong's workshop customers and the grandson of the owner of her favorite restaurant, Gamjatang. Gayong secretly knew something about Sang Tae. Finally, a YouTuber named Young walked by. He had moved to town a year earlier with his wife. That made 5. The Jinn was ready to grant their wishes and prove that humans were indeed greedy and corrupt. That night, Gayong dreamed she was wearing traditional Middle Eastern clothing and laughing joyfully. She wasn't sure if it was a memory from a past life or just a dream. According to Sade, the Jinn's companion, it seemed the Jinn might lose again. Even Gayong's first wish showed that she still cared about others. Just like in her previous lives, she had always put others before herself. The Jinn refused to believe it, so he traveled into the past to see for himself. And indeed, in every lifetime, Gayong had always chosen compassion over selfishness. Seeing the Jinn having so much fun, Gayong began to grow suspicious. She asked why her first wish had not yet come true. The Jinn explained that she had to wait until the 5 chosen people's desires reached their absolute peak. To convince her, the Jinn gave Gayong a pen of truth, a magical pen that could only write the truth. The pen originally belonged to Suhan, a wealthy man who owned many tall buildings in the city. The Jinn then instructed Gayong to pluck one of Suyan's feathers when he wasn't paying attention. Suddenly, the Jinn pushed Gayong off the top of a building. Seeing this, Suyan quickly rushed to save her. It turned out that Suyan was not an ordinary human. He was an angel of death. As usual, Gayong wasn't surprised. When Suyan let his guard down, Gayong managed to pull out one of his feathers. Both Suyan and the Jinn were supernatural beings, but they had very different fates. The Jinn was imprisoned inside a magic lamp, while Suyan was free to walk the earth, collecting souls. Their relationship was bitter because the Jinn knew that Suyan had once tried to sink his lamp by filling it with sand. Curious, Gayong decided to test the pen. She wrote in her notebook that she was nothing but a burden to her grandmother. But to her surprise, the writing changed to say, "Gayong is her grandmother's strength." Shocked, she realized how wrong she had been all along. Her grandmother never saw her as a burden. Meanwhile, at the supermarket, Imsen was constantly scolded by his arrogant assistant manager. One day, while in the storage room, he found a lamp and rubbed it. The Jinn appeared before him and immediately offered him 3 wishes. Without hesitation or fear, Imsen wished to become the superior of the assistant manager, who always looked down on him. The next day, Imsen was suddenly promoted to store manager. He even ordered his former superior to arrange the merchandise. His coworkers thought the promotion was well-deserved, considering how hard he had worked for years. However, when Imsen met Gayong later, he told her that he would no longer repair his car at her workshop because he planned to buy a new one instead. The Jinn explained that this was the true nature of humans. They always wanted more and more. Through Sade, the Jinn eventually learned that besides running a car workshop, Gayong was also involved in stock trading and had made a great deal of money from it. Gayong lived a very disciplined life. On the 4th of every month, she went diving. On the 14th, she went hiking. On the 24th, she visited a wood workshop. And every Wednesday, she ate gamjatang with her best friend Minji. It turned out all these routines were preparations for her own death. She had even built 2 coffins, one for her grandmother and one for herself. She was ready to leave this world when her grandmother passed away. The Jinn and Sade grew worried that if her grandmother died first, their plan would fail. So the Jinn decided to help Gayong's grandmother in any way he could, even pulling weeds from her backyard. One day, Gayong, realizing that Sade knew the Jinn, asked about his past and how he had died. Sade couldn't answer and instead asked the Jinn about it. The Jinn became annoyed because Gayong seemed to care more about how he had died than why he was imprisoned. He said that while trapped inside the lamp, he constantly thought about her, about why that little girl had done such a thing to him, and whether she ever regretted it. Unknowingly, Gayong overheard every word the Jinn said. That night, she invited the Jinn to have dinner with her. She sat quietly, staring out the window. Then the Jinn invited her to the top of a tower in the middle of the city, on the condition that she wouldn't push him again. Up there, Gayong confessed that she had started to enjoy the Jinn's presence around her. The Jinn was delighted and turned off all the city lights, making the stars shine brighter. Gayong smiled and said that in moments like this, a man usually kissed the woman beside him, and that she wouldn't mind if the Jinn did the same. At first, he refused, but eventually it was Gayong who leaned in first. Soon, the Jinn began to like it too and kissed her back. After that night, Gayong became addicted. She kept looking for the Jinn, wanting to kiss him again and again. Gayong kept wanting to kiss the Jinn, until one day he told her that it couldn't be done just any time. There were certain rules. He made up an excuse, saying that a kiss should only happen when it was raining and while they were drinking together. Though Gayong found it unnecessarily complicated, she agreed to wait for the rain. Meanwhile, at the bank where Mrs. Gong worked as an employee with access to customer account balances, she grew jealous after seeing how Gayong's balance kept increasing. She was also annoyed that both Minji and Gayong had become priority clients at the bank, forcing her to personally serve them. From that moment on, the Jinn began avoiding Gayong. Perhaps it was because that kiss had been his first. After being trapped for hundreds of years, his heart now beat faster than ever. Sade joked that if it truly was the Jinn's first kiss, he should have at least cleaned his tartar beforehand. Embarrassed, the Jinn went to Minji's dental clinic to have his teeth cleaned, but since he had no money, he couldn't pay for the service. Minji later informed Gayong about it, saying that the man she was seeing might be handsome, but unfortunately, he didn't have anything to his name. That day, the city was holding a grand fireworks festival. Everyone went out to enjoy it, except for Gayong, who stayed busy at her car repair shop. Then Suyeon appeared and greeted her. Previously, Gayong hadn't had the chance to ask who Suyeon really was, but after seeing his black wings, she realized Suyeon must be an angel. More precisely, the angel of death. Gayong also realized that Suyeon had often been seen giving gifts to elderly people, and shortly afterward, those elders would pass away. Now Gayong asked whether Suyeon had been watching her. Suyeon didn't deny it. He said, "This is God's command. I was sent to behead any demon who submits to a human." Enraged, Gayong shouted that she would never allow Suyeon to kill what belonged to her, meaning the Jinn. That night, Gayong confronted the Jinn, asking who Suyeon really was and what their connection had been. The Jinn then revealed that Suyeon's real name was Ezeliel, an angel who had fought against the Jinn for 300 years. During that great war, the Jinn and his brothers had been separated. One of his brothers had the power to control the rain, and Gayong expressed her desire to meet him, but the Jinn refused, saying he didn't even know where his brother was anymore. Meanwhile, at the supermarket, Imsen, who had been promoted to manager, wasn't doing his job well. He started repeating the same arrogant behavior once shown by his former assistant manager. He mistreated his employees so badly that many resigned. Still unsatisfied, Imsen thought he should have been promoted at a younger age. So he made his second wish, to return 20 years into the past, but still as the supermarket's manager. Back at the garage, Gayong met an old friend who had just moved to the small town. There was something strange about the atmosphere between them, something that made Sade growl at the man named Junu. That night, the rain poured heavily, and Gayong eagerly prepared herself for her long-awaited kiss with the Jinn. But no matter where she searched, the Jinn was nowhere to be found. When the rain finally stopped, she met him again, only to find him slightly annoyed after seeing her talking comfortably with another man earlier. At that moment, Gay, one of the chosen people, approached them. Gay wished to become a handsome human in his 40s, an age of maturity and wisdom. Within moments, his wish was granted, and he transformed into the most handsome man in town. Unfortunately, even though his face had changed, his arrogant attitude remained the same. Curious about where the Jinn actually lived inside his lamp, Gayong decided to take a look. To her surprise, the lamp's interior only contained a single chair, the one he always sat on. There was nothing else. Feeling sorry for him, Gayong decided to fill the magic lamp with various things to make it feel more like a home. The Jinn then asked if Gayong wasn't afraid of him. Gayong replied that the only thing she feared was losing her grandmother forever because she was her protector. Gayong then asked if killing the Jinn would send him to heaven. He answered, "Of course." Hearing that, Gayong immediately chased after him. Outside the lamp, Gayong's grandmother began shaking it, causing Jin and Gayong to fall into each other's arms. The sound of rain could be heard outside. It seemed like the perfect moment for them to kiss. Unfortunately, they were missing just one drink. So, Gayong and Jin hurried outside to buy some. At that moment, Gayong saw her grandmother crying after hearing that her friend, Mr. Kim, a local woodcraftsman, had passed away. Seeing the elderly people in town slowly passing away one by one, Gayong became afraid that her grandmother might leave her soon as well. She then told Jin that for her second wish, she wanted her grandmother to become young again. Gayong asked Jin to grant the wish 3 days later, since the town was still in mourning. She wanted everything to go smoothly without raising suspicion. To cover it up, she told her grandmother, Pangem, that they were going to Hawaii and asked her to spread the news to the neighbors. Upon hearing that, the neighbors felt jealous, thinking Pangem's granddaughter, Gayong, must be very rich. Meanwhile, Imsen, who was now a supermarket manager, wasn't living the smooth life she had imagined. Her daughter had gone astray, often getting drunk and dropping out of college. Imsen felt disappointed and regretful because, ever since becoming a manager, she had little time for her daughter. Jin then offered her a third wish, to reset everything back to the beginning. But Imsen refused, not wanting to lose her last chance. 3 days later, Gayong saw her grandmother wake up looking as young as her. Pangam was so beautiful that she kept fainting in disbelief every time she looked in the mirror. Slowly, she began to enjoy her youthful appearance. She started wearing Gayong's clothes and, to avoid suspicion, changed her name to Miju, a beautiful woman from Seoul. However, Jin started to feel uneasy about Gayong's second wish. Once again, her wish wasn't for herself, but for someone else's happiness. At that moment, Sooyeon came to Jin's lamp and warned him not to interfere with human life, especially not to the point of turning animals into humans. He also scolded Jin for making Gayong's grandmother young again, reminding him that the world had its own balance and rules. The naive Jin decided to follow Sooyeon's advice and restore everything to normal. So, when Gae, the dog, asked for money and a new identity for his second wish, Jin ended up stealing Sooyeon's money, thinking it was the most normal thing to do. To experience a normal life, Jin decided to work in a cabbage field. For the first time ever, he worked and earned his own money. One night, Sang, who had just returned home from work, accidentally hit a deer with his car. Instead of helping it, he intended to kill it again. While grabbing a crowbar, he found an old lamp and unknowingly rubbed it. Suddenly, Jin appeared, ready to grant his wish. Sang thought Jin was joking and carelessly wished for the deer he had hit to come back to life. Instantly, the deer revived, which only made Sang furious, feeling that his wish had been wasted. When he tried to hit Jin, Jin struck back, saying that he would indeed fulfill his wish. Jin granted Sangtae's wish, but that didn't mean he couldn't harm him. He gave Sangtae some time to think about his second wish and promised to return later. Meanwhile, Gayong installed CCTV cameras around her house to monitor her grandmother's movements. She now had to hide Pangem's true identity from everyone. The neighbors began to wonder about the whereabouts of Gayong's grandmother, who was rumored to have gone to Hawaii alone. Gayong explained that she couldn't accompany her because she was too busy. In town, Miju, Pangem's new identity, was out for a walk when she accidentally met Minji, Gayong's best friend. Miju actually knew Minji very well, but had to pretend otherwise to keep her true identity a secret. Her cheerful nature quickly made Minji comfortable around her, and their growing closeness made Gayong jealous. Her grandmother now seemed to enjoy spending time with Minji more than with her. At the bank where Bugong worked, she grew frustrated when her boss forced her to promote a retirement program to Gayong. One day, she discovered the magic lamp and was overjoyed when the genie appeared. Her long-awaited chance had finally come. Without hesitation, she wished for all the money from Gayong's account to be transferred into hers. Jin was taken aback, realizing that Bugong's wish was driven purely by envy and hatred. When Gayong found out about this, she wasn't surprised. Now, 3 people who had made wishes to the genie had all revealed their true natures, selfish and greedy. Inside Jin's magic lamp, Gayong noticed an hourglass. But it wasn't really an hourglass. It was an urn containing the ashes of his past self. When she touched it, she saw a vision of herself smiling, as if she were inside Jin's lamp in a slightly different version of reality. Jin told her that such a thing was impossible, as no human from another time had ever entered his lamp before. Later, Gayong tried dressing like the woman she had seen in her dreams. Suddenly, Suyeon appeared at her house, this time to help Gayong decide on her final wish. Suyeon was certain that Gayong already knew Jin's true intention, that Jin planned to kill her. In the past, it was Gayong who had imprisoned Jin. Now, Suyeon wanted to show Gayong how she had died long ago. The next morning, the police arrived at Gayong's workshop to ask about a blonde woman who had recently gone missing. Gayong and Sade promised to contact them if they saw her. Previously, Sang-tae had repaired his car's broken windshield at Gayong's garage. Upon examining the glass shards, Gayong noticed traces of blood and strands of a woman's hair. Quietly collecting the evidence, she became convinced that the missing woman was somehow connected to Sang-tae. Meanwhile, Jin met his acquaintance Sang-hok, and the two spent some time together. Not long after, Sade arrived and reported that Suyeon had visited Gayong, intending to show her the truth about her death. Alarmed, Jin rushed to find Gayong and discovered her diving deep underwater, seemingly training herself to face her own death. Jin appeared among the rising bubbles and said, "No matter how much you prepare for your death, you must still die by my hands." Then, Jin fixed Gayong's oxygen equipment. At the same time, the elderly women in the neighborhood began to grow suspicious of Miju. One of them, named Bokja, said that Pangem, Gayong's grandmother, hadn't answered any of her calls. And ever since Pangem disappeared, a young woman claiming to be from Seoul had been living in Gayong's house. The women began whispering among themselves, suspecting that Gayong might have killed her own grandmother. Together with the village head, Changsik, they went to Gayong's house to demand an explanation. Tension filled the air as Gayong struggled to find the right words. The village head then decided to make a video call to Pangem's number, and suddenly, Gayong's grandmother appeared on the screen. The call was suddenly answered. The voice claimed to be Gayong's grandmother, saying she was at a beach in Hawaii. Hearing this, the neighbors felt relieved. But Gayong was confused. How could her grandmother answer the call? It turned out that Jin had disguised himself to protect Gayong. Meanwhile, Bugong grew frustrated because Gayong's money couldn't be fully transferred into her account. Jin had followed the rules of the human world, which limited daily transfers from Gayong's account to only 10 million won. After thinking it over, Bugong decided to use her second wish. She asked for Gayong's transfer limit to be increased to the maximum. Not long after, Gayong came to the bank and personally raised her account limit. Excited, Bugong began transferring large amounts into her personal account every day, eager to buy an expensive handbag like Gayong's. One day, Jin's young playmate appeared with bruises. The child was often beaten by his mother's boyfriend and wished that the man would disappear. Out of pity, Jin granted the boy's wish. He took the man to the desert, where he was attacked by wild dogs. Suyeon became angry that Jin had once again interfered with human lives. Jin argued, "Why do you pretend to be a righteous angel, Sooyeon? You're just as cruel. You're the one who wants to show your own brutality by forcing Gayong to relive her death." Sooyeon replied coldly that Jin's punishment still wasn't enough. Later at the bank, Bugong, proudly carrying her new handbag, was suddenly called in by her manager and the bank director. They accused her of embezzling money from Gayong's account into her own. They had noticed her frequently checking Gayong's balance. Although Bugong insisted she knew nothing, the bank director didn't believe her. Her newly purchased luxury bag raised even more suspicion. The director demanded that Bugong contact Gayong before he reported their bank to the authorities. At Junu's house, the village chief, Changsik, tried to visit but found the place guarded by tough men who looked like soldiers. He thought he saw a strange man tied up inside, but when he looked again, the man was gone. Junu's son, Jung-hun, curiously offered an apple to the tied-up man, wondering what his connection was to Jin, and why God had brought them together. Eventually, Gayong agreed to Sooyeon's request to witness how she had died in her past life. In a flashback, Jin was seen waiting for his next master. A group of merchants passed by, leading several child slaves. Suddenly, a pack of starving desert dogs attacked them. One of the children, Hunbis, was left behind as a sacrifice. Little Gayong, who had fallen nearby, found a magical lamp. When she rubbed it, Jin appeared and offered to grant her 3 wishes. Without hesitation, young Gayong wished for Hunbis to be saved and given a long life. Jin granted the wish, but he killed all the merchants and transferred their lifespans to Hunbis. Then Jin forced young Gayong to make a second wish. She asked for the slave trade of children to be stopped forever. Jin fulfilled the wish, but it caused chaos. Many people died as a result. That was when the angel of death, Ejilil, appeared and said, "All of this is your fault, Gayong. You must take responsibility for these deaths." Overwhelmed with guilt and despair, Gayong made her 3rd wish. She wanted both herself and Jin to be punished together. At that moment, the wish was granted. Jin, who could not die for 20 years, mourned the small, lifeless body of young Gayong as it decayed into ashes. He took some of those ashes and sealed them inside an hourglass to remind himself of the one who had cursed him to such a fate. When present-day Gayong saw this vision of the past, she looked into Jin's eyes. Not the eyes of an angry demon, but the sorrowful eyes of someone burdened by deep, endless regret. When Gayong touched Jin's face, the hourglass containing the ashes began to move, signaling that time had started again. Slowly, Jin felt pain and memories of their past together resurfaced. They both smiled as they gazed at the moon. When Gayong and Sooyeon revisited the moment of Jin's past death, Gayong noticed the deep sadness and regret in his eyes. The memory reminded her of a poem about true sorrow that her grandmother used to recite. However, Sooyeon seemed displeased that Gayong had discovered the truth. He tried to convince her that Jin was an evil being. Gayong countered by asking why Sooyeon had remained silent and allowed so many people to die, even though he could have stopped it. Frustrated, Gayong struck Sooyeon again. Jin then asked Sade about his past relationship with a woman, curious why Gayong's face appeared in his vision. Sade didn't know much, only that Jin had once had a relationship with a female genie named Ginia. They realized the hourglass had started moving, indicating that Jin had less time to influence Gayong. After returning from her journey to the past, Gayong became curious about the time before Jin was trapped inside the magical lamp. What had happened during those 20 years? She investigated Jin's past, which dated back to the Gore dynasty, during a massive earthquake that claimed many lives. Gayong wondered if it might have been caused by one of her own past wishes. She then told Jin that she had seen his sorrowful expression in front of her past corpse and asked why, since she thought he had hated her. Gayong remarked, "I saw you with a woman. Did you ever love someone before?" Jin admitted that he had once been in a relationship with a female genie named Ginia. Gayong felt jealous and increasingly curious, worried that the situation might worsen. Jin fled to seek Iram, Sooyeon's pet owl, for help in finding his former lover. Meanwhile, Imsun was fired from her job at Sion, despite having worked as a manager for 20 years. Frustrated, she realized that nothing she did ever went according to plan. Elsewhere, Guy told his driver that he was searching for his father. They visited his old home, and Gae refused to leave until he reunited with his family. At the same time, Hang received a notification from Jin's app on his phone, offering to grant a wish. Drunk, he wished to solve a village murder mystery to boost the popularity of his YouTube channel. Suddenly, he was transported to the forest, where he discovered a human skull, and accidentally broadcast it live on YouTube. The video went viral, making him famous instantly. However, the villagers became fearful and believed Gayong, a known eccentric, was the murderer. As a friend, Minji grew angry at the gossip and told them to leave, warning that she would report them to the police if they didn't. This news also reached Gayong's grandmother, Panggyeom, now called Miju, who cried and urged Gayong not to pay attention to the malicious rumors. While helping her grandmother fetch vegetables in the field, Bugong angrily confronted Gayong, demanding she come to the bank and explain the money that had supposedly been transferred to her. Bugong threatened to call the police if Gayong refused. Gayong declined, intending to punish Bugong's greed. She was confident that even if the police were involved, Bugong, not she, would be the one in trouble. Bugong argued, "I got the money from a genie. Whether you believe it or not, I'm innocent. And I could even ask Jin to kill you." But Gayong wasn't afraid. She said that she still had one final wish to make to Jin and would cancel all of Bugong's requests, surprising her since it seemed Gayong knew more about Jin than expected. That night, Jin came to see Gayong, asking if she was all right after hearing the rumors spreading through the town. To cheer her up, he took her to the highest hill to gaze at the stars. Gayong tried to calm herself while teasing Jin to make him smile. When they returned, they encountered Minji, who began to suspect something after learning that Miju was living in Gayong's house. Miju admitted that she was the sister of Jin, the man who had been with Gayong. However, Minji didn't believe her. Gayong intervened and promised to explain everything later. Meanwhile, Sangtae found his magical lamp in his room and immediately summoned Jin to make a second wish. He wished to return 20 years into the past, to the night when he had killed a woman found by Gayong in the forest. He wanted to confirm whether there had been any witnesses and suspected that Gayong had seen him. However, he was mistaken. The witness to the murder was actually his own mother, who decided to keep her son's secret tightly hidden. Returning to the present, Sangtae thanked his mother, who was asleep at the time. Upon learning the truth, Gayong realized that Sangtae was a serial killer. She suspected that the girl who had gone missing was also one of his victims. Gayong also realized that everyone who received wishes from Jin turned out to be selfish and greedy. She admitted that she felt powerless against Jin, but Jin hesitated, knowing that all of Gayong's wishes could potentially defeat him. Gayong reassured him, "Don't worry, Jin. He will lose." Her words seemed to touch him. It appeared he was beginning to care deeply for her. The next day, a man confined in Junghun's house put the entire village to sleep. He then approached Jin's magical lamp. There, Iram recognized the man. It was actually a Jin named Seti. Soon they discovered that Jin had been bound by magical ropes placed by Iram. They realized that Shada was behind it, and no creature could break the bindings. But Gayong managed to free him, leaving everyone puzzled. Jin then sought to understand what had happened to his brother Shady and why Shadiba had appeared as if to warn him. Suhyun explained, Shady is currently imprisoned by someone who is his master. He is an immortal being created by a Jin long ago. The child that Gayong once saved, Hunbis, is still alive and now known as Chun, according to young Gayong's wish. At Junghun's house, he interrogated his subordinates to find out how Shady had escaped the previous night. After discovering that a man had assisted Shady, Junghun killed him in front of Junu, who immediately vomited in horror. Shady deliberately revealed himself so that Jin would come and help stop Junghun. However, without Shady realizing, Junghun had been waiting to lure Jin. Shady pleaded with Junghun, calling him Halid. Junghun's real goal was to find out who could break the magical bindings and control the lamp to command all spirits. While touching the hourglass, Gayong had a vision of a child named Khalid weaving a carpet. After leaving the lamp, Gayong used Miju and Sade to study the mysterious ropes binding Jin. She realized that only she, as a human, could release them. Meanwhile, Junoo at Jung-hun's house intended to leave this fake family, but a woman pretending to be Jung-hun's mother warned him not to act recklessly. Everyone in the house called Jung-hun father and had been trained like animals. They obeyed only him and could potentially kill Junoo. She then instructed Junoo to prepare, as there were tasks he still had to perform. At the same time, Sang-tae enjoyed the success of his crimes being discussed on Youngseon's YouTube channel. That night, Ga-young visited Sang-tae's house and presented evidence of the crimes she had found in his car. Pretending to want to partner with him in murder, Ga-young flattered Sang-tae, who assumed she was just like him. Ga-young clarified that she had never killed anyone, fearing evidence might be left behind, and hoped Sang-tae had done the same. He promised to eliminate all evidence before collaborating with her. In reality, Ga-young only wanted to exploit Sang-tae's final wish in hoping it would reveal the location of the missing woman. She then reported everything to the police. Ga-young also brought up the missing 20-year time gap, questioning what Jin had been doing during that period. Jin was surprised, as he too had no memory of those years. After learning from Sade where Jung-hun was holding Shady, Jin invited Ga-young to Dubai to investigate the events of the past 20 years. Ga-young agreed, on the condition that her grandmother, Minji, and of course Sade would join them. In Dubai, Jin took Ga-young to meet his former lover, Jinia, who had the face of a popular Netflix actress, Song Hek. She immediately recognized Ga-young as the woman responsible for Jin's imprisonment. Unfortunately, Jinia refused to reveal the details of the missing time and said, "Some of Jin's memories have been sealed." Meanwhile, Zahara, Jin's remaining sibling, was instructed not to tell Jin anything about the past. Soo-hyun punished Iram for revealing Jinia's location to Jin. Before returning, Ga-young took her grandmother to see her daughter, Ga-young's mother, from a distance. Miju, formerly known as Pangem, cried. Although she had never met her daughter again and had been hurt by her, she still missed her deeply. Afterward, Imsun decided to divorce her husband and punish her daughter. She summoned Jin to make her final wish, to forget the previous 2 wishes. She wanted to prove her greed and continue making requests. However, she was wrong. After making the 3rd and final wish, she would forget Jin and the magical lamp forever. Upon realizing this, Ga-young became fearful, knowing that after making her own final wish, she too would forget Jin. After discovering that Soo-hyun had been torturing Iram, Sade became angry and bit him, causing Jin and Soo-hyun to argue again. Soo-hyun then revealed that Shady was not a prisoner of Jung-hun or Khalid. Rather, Jun was Shady's son. Shady had once loved a human. Returning to Korea, Ga-young resumed her routine of mountain climbing. At the cliff's edge, Junoo confronted Ga-young and forced her to reveal her final wish. When Ga-young refused, Junoo pushed her off the cliff. As Ga-young fell, she remembered everyone she had ever loved and resigned herself to her fate. However, Jin arrived and immediately saved her. Jin was angry because Ga-young hadn't called him or used her wish to survive. Ga-young replied that she would rather die than lose Jin, fearing she would forget him. When Jin learned that Junoo had been the one to push Ga-young, he showed no mercy and killed him. Meanwhile, Jung-hun, also known as Khalid, watched from a distance, forced to search for his false father figure. At that moment, Ejjalil, also known as Soo-hyun, appeared before Jung-hun and struck him, causing the true identity, Khalid, or Hunbis, to emerge from Jung-hun's body. He warned the spirit of Khalid not to interfere with his plans and to stay away from Ga-young and Jin, because Jin was destined to die by his hands. Meanwhile, after helping Ga-young fall asleep, Jin asked Sade to watch over her while he went away. Jin traveled to Zahara's barren fields, a place that once bloomed with beautiful flowers. He wanted to recover his lost memories. Zahara had promised not to reveal anything about those memories, but admitted her regret for helping Sedi transfer the soul of his half-human, half-spirit son into the body of the immortal boy named Hunbis. This explained why Hunbis's body was called Khalid. Due to Zahara's actions, her flower garden had been destroyed, leaving only one flower, Khalid's soul. Elsewhere, Ga-young finally reunited with her former family, though they did not recognize her as she now lived as a human. Only Hanel, the youngest child, trusted her. Ga-young promised to return. Meanwhile, Miju began frequently visiting Minji's clinic for dental checkups. After an x-ray, she went to help in the volunteer kitchen at Soohyun's company. When Soohyun saw her, he scolded Miju, reminding her that looking younger did not extend her lifespan. Even though Miju had cared for Gayong lovingly, she would still die. Soohyun said, "When the plum tree in your yard blooms, that will be the time Pangem dies." At the bank, Gayong received an apology and compensation for her lost money from the manager. She decided to withdraw all her funds in cash, which frustrated Bugong. She then returned to the workshop to review CCTV footage and discovered that Jun's men had been secretly watching her. Soon after, Junghoon arrived and asked Gayong to use her final wish to end his immortality. However, Gayong sensed a lie behind the words of the child, whose real name was Khalid. To confirm, she injured Khalid's face, and the wound quickly healed, proving he was indeed immortal. Jun's men almost attacked Gayong, but Sade transformed into a jaguar and incapacitated them. The village chief, Changsik, arrived, suspicious of Junghoon and his men. He had been observing them and realized they were targeting Gayong. Gayong asked Changsik to protect Minji and Miju, as she already had Sade as her protector. Jin then infiltrated Jun's house and found Shady, who was now pitifully imprisoned by his own son. Shady regretted his actions and wanted to atone by saving the world from destruction. Jin warned Shady not to harm Gayong and threatened to kill Shady's son, Hallett, if Gayong was hurt. Shady promised to help Jin by slowing Hallett's movements as much as possible. Soon after, Gayong was attacked by a group of men attempting to steal her withdrawn bank money. She was struck, but Jin arrived and saved her, punishing the robbers by throwing them into the underworld, hell. Gayong was dragged along, shocked and saddened, realizing this could be Jin's fate if he ever lost. After returning from hell, Kim Gae made her final wish, to become a dog again so he could say goodbye to his family, knowing her life was ending. Jin hesitated, remembering that Kim Gae family had once abandoned him. Still, Kim Gae decided to return, leaving his money to his driver, and transformed back into a dog. That night, Gayong and Jin walked together. Jin explained that the Almighty had granted him 3 wishes. He had already used 2 but could not remember whether the 3rd had been fulfilled. From his conversation with Zahara, Jin realized that his 3rd wish had been for Gayong to live again, and that they had ultimately lived in love. Hearing this, Gayong asked Jin to take her to his favorite place, where they watched cherry blossoms fall. Jin had long wanted to bring her there. From the beginning, he had never intended to kill Gayong. Instead, he surrendered and accepted his fate. Meanwhile, Minji, upon seeing Miju's dental x-ray, realized that her teeth resembled those of Gayong's grandmother, Pangem. Inside the lamp, Gayong recalled seeing strange writings on the wall, though she did not know their meaning. She remembered the inscriptions and wrote down the sentences she could recall. Jin was shocked, unable to remember who had written them. He asked Sunghon and Iram, but they refused to reveal anything. At the same time, Sangtae summoned Jin to fulfill his final wish, to return to April, the exact time he had killed the blonde girl, and repeat it without mistakes. Jin agreed, but first informed Gayong. Gayong planned to save the girl by asking Jin to visit her in April and reveal that Sangtae was the murderer. Jin rushed to April, met Gayong in her room, and explained his arrival. At first, Gayong did not believe him until she saw the book she had written in the future and the timeline showing when Sangtae would kidnap and kill the blonde girl. Before long, Sangtae attempted his crime, but Gayong immediately attacked him and reported him to the police. Together, Gayong and Jin successfully changed the future and saved the girl. Later, Gayong asked Jin why they had become so close, despite Jin supposedly wanting to kill her. Jin smiled. Whether it was the Gayong from April or the Gayong from the future, he felt increasingly drawn to her and missed her deeply. The future Gayong recalled the moments they had shared and changed together. Though it did not rain that night, Jin still kissed her. He promised to remember all their moments together. The writings on the lamp's wall reassured Jin of their love, as they contained the word Habib, meaning my love. Meanwhile, Bugong received a message from the bank informing him of significant losses, which led to his dismissal. Yongxian decided to tell his wife, Dajin, about Jin's existence and proposed that they collaborate on 2 wishes to get rich quickly. However, Dajin had her own plans. One wish was to save her father, who was suffering from terminal cancer. Unfortunately, Han strongly refused, insisting that the wish belonged to him. An argument broke out between husband and wife. Elsewhere, Jung-hun, attempting to weave a mat at home, became frustrated because his weaving skills had disappeared. In a flashback, a tragic night from Jin's forgotten past was revealed. When Khalid, Shady's son, entered Hunbus's body, he became furious about his immortality. Jin inquired about Gayong, who might have been the reason he had massacred the townspeople that night. Khalid became fascinated by Jin's power. In the village, Sungra felt empty and often bragged about his children, even though they had no desire to see him. He was deeply jealous of Pangam, as Gayong had once sent her on a vacation to Hawaii. At Pangam's home, she asked Jin to take care of Gayong and to try to get along with her. She smiled with relief as she saw the two of them playfully arguing over trivial things, like food. Later, Gayong and Jin continued examining the writings on the wall. Although Jin insisted that Gayong had written them, she still felt jealous, worried that the writer might have been Jinia, and that Jin might be in danger. Jin transformed his lamp into a portable water bottle and asked Gayong to carry it wherever she went. He also advised her to use her final wish to save herself if she were ever captured again by Shady or Khalid. However, Gayong refused to leave Jin. She told him she would never let him go. Meanwhile, Minji began investigating Pangam's past in her hometown and discovered that Miju's face resembled Pangam's when she was young. Pangam herself was preparing for Gayong's future after her passing, hoping the plum tree's flowers would not bloom before the next season. Sensing something unusual about her grandmother, Gayong invited her to Seoul to create beautiful memories together. While Gayong was away, Jin visited Sang-hok to say goodbye, explaining that he would no longer come to play games. Sang-hok understood, as his mother's boyfriend was gone, and he wanted to spend time with his mother at home. After returning from Seoul, Gayong visited Minji at her dental clinic. Though Minji was still angry, she helped Gayong and concealed Miju's identity. However, Sungra grew suspicious after seeing Miju buy groceries multiple times at the supermarket. That night, after her grandfather's funeral, Gayong told her grandmother that she would briefly travel to Dubai to attend to something important. There, she hoped to speak with Jinia about Jin, particularly whether Jin had ever used his last wish. Suddenly, Jung-hun's men appeared and blocked Gayong in a secluded alley. Jinia arrived just in time and rescued her, bringing her into her lamp. Inside, Jinia revealed that Jin had once fought on the front lines in a war against angels, saving many Jin who refused to submit to humans. However, at one point, Jin fell in love with a human. During that time, his rage, known as the Golden Fury, destroyed an entire city for the sake of a single woman. Even so, Jinia refused to elaborate further. After confirming that the woman mentioned in the wall writings was indeed herself, Gayong felt slightly relieved. Meanwhile, the argument between Dajin and Yongxian escalated. Dajin deleted their YouTube channel, changed its password, and filed for divorce. Han called Jin, asking him to make Dajin forget everything about Jin and the wishes. After fulfilling her second request, Jin departed for Dubai and found Gayong standing near a stone marked with the name Mutalib. A young boy passed by, holding a red balloon. The sight triggered Jin's memories of the past, suddenly throwing him back in time, where he met Gayong in those early days. At that time, Gayong wanted to leave immediately after Mutalib, Jin's master then, made his last wish. Unfortunately, Jin returned to the present without finding any answers. All he could say to Gayong was that perhaps he had disappointed her in the past. Afterward, Jin took Gayong somewhere to cheer her up. He even gave her a new outfit, which reminded him of the Gayong from long ago. They spent the night dancing, and Gayong admitted that she had liked Jin for a long time, perhaps ever since they first met. Back in Korea, Sungri grew increasingly suspicious that Miju was actually Pangam. He sneaked into her house to taste her cooking and confirm his suspicions. However, Pangam woke up with a toothache and caught him inside her home. Startled, Sungri rushed to Miju and pulled at her clothes, noticing a distinct fly pattern on her shirt, a signature mark confirming she was Pangam. Pangam finally admitted the truth and pleaded for her secret to be kept, but Sungri angrily left. Unfortunately, their conversation was overheard by Jung-hun's men, who immediately reported it to him. Jung-hun then ordered his subordinate Isran to kill Sungre before the secret could spread to the villagers. After dancing, Jin and Gayong prepared to go home. Suddenly, Jin noticed the shadow of a young boy carrying a torch reflected on the water. When he looked around, he found himself alone in the past, sitting and leaning back while smoking a shisha. Finally, Jin glimpsed the missing gap in his memories. He had been an arrogant Jin. Even after 20 years, he had not received punishment after young Gayong had wished for him to die in the desert. As Jin walked through the city, he saw a woman selling dates. From her scent, he was convinced she was the little girl who had died 20 years ago. However, the woman, who we now know as Gayong, did not recognize him. Jin startled her, causing her merchandise to nearly fall. Gayong demanded compensation, so Jin took money from a man and gave it to her. Curious about her, Jin followed her. Despite her hardships, Gayong worked diligently and shared her leftover food with the homeless. Eventually, after saving enough money to buy a camel and return to Goryeo, the Korean name for her former homeland, a group of men stole Gayong's money and beat her. Jin killed the men and returned her stolen money. However, Gayong was terrified and ran away from him. Jin comforted her, explaining that he was a demon and that the thieves had deserved to die, as their victims had not been only her. To soften Gayong's heart, Jin promised to show her the way back to Goryeo. Gayong smiled, planning to save money, buy a camel, and finally return to her homeland. Seeing Gayong smile stirred something strange within Jin's chest. He realized he was beginning to develop feelings for her. He admired her even more because, despite being able to ask anything of him, Gayong chose instead to seek help from the Almighty, proving she could not be tempted or swayed by Jin. One day, Jin noticed Gayong caring for a sickly child named Lee, the son of a man named Shady. Hilal, who knew Jin was a demon, begged him to heal the boy and offered payment in the form of a tapestry woven from thread said to bind spirits. Jin refused, knowing the child's fate was not meant to be long-lived. Because of this, Khalid grew resentful and vengeful toward Jin. That night, Jin saw Gayong sewing a garment, struggling to stay awake. She planned to wear it when she returned to Goryeo. Jin then brought Gayong into his lamp. There, she told him about Goryeo, her homeland, a place blessed with 4 seasons, including a spring filled with falling cherry blossoms. Jin grew fonder of Gayong as he listened. She prayed not only for herself, but also for others, and that selflessness moved him deeply. Wanting to remember her forever, Jin stole a feather from Ejalil and used it to inscribe Gayong's memories inside his lamp. It was then revealed that it was not Gayong who had written on the wall, but Jin himself, who had fallen deeply in love with her. Later, Jin gained a new master, a slave trader named Mutalib, the same man who had once abandoned Hunbis and the dying Gayong in the desert. Mutalib had previously been helped by Gayong when she was a beggar. For his first wish, Mutalib asked for wealth and became the richest man in Dubai. For his second wish, he asked Jin to destroy everyone who had ever humiliated him. One day, Mutalib met Gayong on the street and offered her anything she desired. Gayong politely refused, trusting instead in her own hard work. Mutalib felt insulted, believing that she had looked down on him. For his third wish, he demanded that Jin make the woman who had just refused him submit to him. Jin was horrified to realize that the woman Mutalib spoke of was Gayong. Jin did not immediately hand her over. As he tried to help Gayong escape, Khalid, whose soul had been swapped with Hunbis and now occupied Hunbis's body, bound Jin's legs with the enchanted thread, taking revenge for Jin's earlier refusal to save him. Enraged by the affection between Jin and Gayong, Mutalib killed Gayong before Jin's eyes. Her blood spilled onto Khalid's soul-binding tapestry. Jin desperately tried to reach Gayong's body, praying for anyone to use his lamp and make a wish, any wish, to save her. But no one would help. The people were selfish, asking instead for gold to rain from the sky, flooding the city with treasure. Amid the chaos, Gayong took her final breath. As her hand fell to the ground and brushed against the thread binding Jin, the thread finally loosened. Freed, Jin unleashed his fury upon Mutalib and destroyed the entire city. That missing memory made Jin realize the truth of Gayong's punishment. She had died as a woman loved by him, and his eternal suffering was his own punishment. The boy who guided Jin through these memories was Hunbis. who revealed that this was his way of punishing Jin for saving his life. Jin then saw himself in the past, burying Gayong in the desert and mourning her for days until her body became one with the sand. He blamed himself and prayed for a chance to meet Gayong again in another life. That was Jin's final wish. Meanwhile, Sungre gathered the villagers and the village chief at Pangem's house to reveal that Pangem had become young again and deceived them all. Naturally, no one believed him. At that time, Pangem was not at home. After Sungre threatened to expose everything, he went to Minji's clinic seeking help. The village chief and villagers assumed Sungre had gone mad out of jealousy toward Pangem. While running into the street, Isran suddenly appeared and hit Sungre with a car, killing him instantly. Jin returned to Gayong, who anxiously awaited him. When she saw the sadness in his eyes and the tears on his face, she realized he now understood their past. Jin blamed himself for Gayong's death, but she tried to comfort him, reminding him that they needed to focus on the present and leave the past behind. Yonghan regretted ever wishing that his wife would forget everything. Because of that wish, Dajin even forgot the new password he had set for their YouTube channel. Realizing his selfishness, Yonghan made his final wish to save Dajin's father from terminal cancer. After Dajin's father was declared healthy, he told his daughter there was a verification request on his phone. It turned out Dajin had added her father's number for YouTube email verification, allowing her to finally recover their channel. After returning home, Gayong hid Pangem and Minji inside the magic lamp, fearing that Junghun's followers were after them. Later, she went to Bugong's house to convince him to sell his final wish to her. With no choice but to cooperate, Bugong devised a plan together with Gayong. Soon after, Ejalil appeared to persuade Gayong to make the right decision. He intended to kill Jin, believing that doing so would please God. However, Gayong refused, determined to make a selfless wish. Ejalil would lose because he was born a malicious psychopath. Jin then told Gayong that Bugong had already made his final wish, following their plan. Jin said his goodbyes, preparing for the coming battle. Gayong embraced him, unsure if they would ever meet again. Meanwhile, Iram received orders from his master, Ejalil. At Junghun's house, he forced Seti to sing in order to lure Jin there. To avoid being enchanted by Seti's song, which could make listeners fall asleep, Junghun injured his own ear with thread. Before Seti could continue singing, Jin arrived and swapped places with him. However, Junghun deceived everyone and killed his own father, Shady, after the swap. Furious, Jin swore to kill Khalid for his brother's death. Halit then ordered his troops to capture Gayong, intending to force her to surrender the final wish and hand over the lamp. Gayong refused to reveal the lamp's location or grant Khalid's last wish. It was then revealed that Bugong's final wish had been for Jin to make Gayong disappear and reappear before him if she were ever in danger. Junghun and Halit assumed Gayong had used her final wish to vanish and immediately commanded their men to search for and capture her. Gayong suddenly appeared before Jin and freed him from the thread bindings. Jin went to Zahara Garden, armed with both the thread and his sword. Shortly after, Iram arrived at Junghun's house carrying the lamp. Seti was shocked by his friend's betrayal, but Iram could not explain much. He was simply following orders from his master. Upon receiving the lamp, Khalid realized that Gayong still had one final wish remaining. He entered the lamp, capturing Minji and Gayong's grandmother, but Sade resisted them with all his strength. Elsewhere, Changsik remembered Gayong's warning. When birds fell from the sky, it would be a sign that danger was coming to the city. He quickly mobilized his hidden military forces and rushed toward Junghun's house. At Zahara Garden, Ejalil appeared to stop Jin, who intended to destroy Khalid's soul flower. Jin explained that he wanted Gayong to make her final wish correctly and hoped she would earn her place in heaven, for she was a good woman. Ejalil, however, doubted that anyone allied with Jin could ever enter heaven. A fierce battle erupted in the sky. Jin cut off Ejalil's wings, causing the Angel of Death to fall. Victorious, Jin chose not to kill him, allowing Ejalil to live and continue his duties, his mission to kill Jin still unfulfilled. The battle made Pangem realize that his own death was near. The plum flowers he had been waiting for in his yard had not yet bloomed. He had, in fact, created those flowers himself by accidentally drying Jin's flower brooch. He asked Minji to deliver one last message full of love to his granddaughter. To protect Minji, Pangam allowed himself to be shot. Before dying, he swallowed the thread carried by Khalid so that Khalid could no longer use it. Khalid ordered his men to cut open Pangam's stomach and retrieve the thread. But Sadeh fought desperately to stop them and ultimately perished. At that moment, Changsik and his troops arrived, and a massive battle broke out. Using the chaos to her advantage, Minji carried Pangam's body into an ambulance, while Khalid managed to capture Gayong and threatened to kill her if she refused to make her final wish. Gayong refused and told him to kill her instead. Meanwhile, in Zahara Garden, Jin destroyed Khalid's soul flower before Khalid could harm Gayong. As a result, Khalid's body disintegrated and vanished forever. Afterward, Jin rescued Gayong from Junghun's and Khalid's followers, who were enraged over their father's death. Sadly, Gayong never had the chance to say goodbye to her grandmother. Pangam also died in the battle. A funeral was held. Although there were no tears, Gayong felt immense pain. Everyone assumed she was a heartless psychopath, but in truth, she was devastated by the loss of her grandmother. Gayong discarded all the clothes her grandmother had worn, hoping to forget her pain. In every corner of the house, she found small notes left by her grandmother. At that time, Bugong approached her. His memories of Jin had been erased, and he was confused by the pile of money in his house. Gayong explained that she had bought something very valuable from him, and that he deserved the money. Bugong still refused, admitting that although he had once been envious of Gayong, he did not want the money. He only wished to work at the bank again and return to his former life. Sometime later, Minji visited Gayong and delivered Pangam's final message. Upon hearing this, Gayong ran to her room and desperately rubbed the magic lamp, hoping Jin would appear. However, after some time, Jin did not appear. Heartbroken, Gayong decided to travel to Dubai without bringing anything with her. Upon arriving, Gayong went deep into the desert, walking alone and continuously calling out for Jin. After hours of wandering under the scorching sun, Jin finally appeared before her. He pleaded with Gayong not to make a selfish wish, but Gayong was certain of her desire. She wished only to experience one day as a normal human, to feel love, heartbreak, happiness, and sacrifice in their purest forms. Although it seemed selfish, her wish was also meant to protect Jin. With a broken heart, Jin knelt before her and confessed his love before granting Gayong's wish. Gayong was the only human who had ever made his heart tremble, and he submitted to her wish. After fulfilling the wish of the woman he loved, Jin departed and Gayong no longer remembered him. At that moment, Gayong began to feel the emotions of others, especially her grandmothers. She experienced their suffering, sadness, and love. For the first time, Gayong truly understood what love and sacrifice meant to the people who had cared for her. Meanwhile, Jin returned to the place where Gayong had once died. They had come full circle, back to the land of their past lives. There, Ajel was waiting to behead Jin. He revealed that Gayong's lifespan was short. She would die the next day. Jin pleaded with Ejalil to save her, but Ejalil refused, saying it was God's decree. He then beheaded Jin in the desert. Iram appeared before the weakened Gayong. He apologized and restored all of her memories of Jin. Now, Gayong fully understood Jin's love and devotion to her across multiple lifetimes. She cried even harder. Not long after, Gayong passed away as the desert's sun rose. News of Gayong's death devastated Minji. The entire city mourned and awaited Gayong's cremation in Korea. After her death, Gayong was reborn as a female Jin. She appeared before Minji and offered her 3 wishes. Minji's first wish was for them to continue their tradition of eating together every Wednesday. For her second wish, she asked Gayong to continue helping poor children in need of dental care at her clinic. Minji knew that Gayong deeply missed Jin, so with complete sincerity, she used her final wish to allow Gayong to reunite with the one she loved most. Once the wish was granted, Minji no longer recognized Gayong, who had now become a Jin. In the afterlife, Pangam caused chaos until he forced Ejalil to grant his wish, to bring Jin back. He could not bear to see his granddaughter, now a female Jin, lonely. On the day the sakura petals fell, Jin finally returned and reunited with Gayong. The two were together again, now working as a pair of Jins. In short, they lived together inside the lamp. Over time, their surroundings grew more beautiful. Jin intentionally grew his hair long to revive Sade. Upon seeing Sade again, as usual, Sade bit Ajel's leg and commanded him to return Irem. The story concludes with Jin and Gayong dancing together in the middle of the desert. At that moment, Gayong's grandmother, Pangem, sent her final message, wishing them both eternal happiness. Sometimes, desires are not meant to change the world, but to heal a wounded heart. Fate may not always be on our side, but love always finds a way to reunite what was once lost. Every wish has a price, and the greatest one is the loss of someone we love. Even an immortal Jin learns that love is a miracle that makes one more human. In the end, every prayer is not just a request, but a memory of how we once lived and loved with all our hearts. Stay tuned for more heartwarming, beautiful stories like this one. Until next time. If you enjoyed today's story, don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe to my channel. Tap the bell icon so you're notified every time I upload a new video. And as always, if there's a movie you'd like me to explain, just drop the name and its country in the comments below. I'd love to hear from you and maybe even feature your suggestion in the next video. Thanks for watching, and see you soon with another heart-touching story.